Hello, Dr. Elmer, Advanced Neurospinal Solutions, and today we're continuing with Meniere's disease, questions relating to it. The Meniere's disease, we talked about what it is, we talked about what causes it. Now we're talking about the solution. Remember, I say often, the closer you get to the truth, the simpler the solution. And because we know what the problem is, the solution lays itself before us, and that's why the name of our clinic is Advanced Neurospinal Solutions. And so we talked about Meniere's, how you lose both hearing and vestibular, meaning knowing where you are in space and control of your balance and that, all on one side, all at once. And it's because of a breaking of the riser's membrane, which separates the two different gradients, the two fluids. On the vestibular side or the balance side, we have high levels of sodium that we're maintaining in order to make those nerves fire and do their job efficiently. On this side, on the cochlear side or the hearing side, it has high potassium, which is very unique in the body because potassium always, except for in this case, causes nerves to not want to fire. Not only to not fire, but to not want to fire in the future, and it takes a lot more energy to fire it. We call it hyperpolarization. And so that's what's happening on this side, and the organ of Corti utilizes that gradient in order to be able to work. But riser's membrane is the barrier, and autoimmune attacks the riser's membrane and bursts it, and the two fluids cross. As they cross, we lose both hearing and balance instantaneously. It's gone. And so, and normally the person just all of a sudden falls down and they can't hear out of that side because now they can't create the impulses from the outside world, the hearing impulses and the gravity and movement impulses from the vestibular system in order to give them a sense of where am I in space, because it depends on both sides to help us to know what's going on and what do I do with it. So, we'll list what the problems are. One, autoimmune. Autoimmune, it means it's attacking you. And what's weird is you could have Hashimoto's and later get Meniere's, right? Because autoimmune is autoimmune. If you have an autoimmune, it's attacking everything, and we label it whatever succumbs, right? And it doesn't go after the bull, right, in the herd. It goes after grandma and the baby. And so whatever's the weakest is going to succumb. And then later, all of a sudden, wow, my connective tissue is having a problem, so we call it systemic lupus erythematosus, but it's still autoimmune, and it's either a Th1 or a Th2 problem, and we got to balance it in order to solve it. Okay, so autoimmune 2, peripheral nervous system downregulation. Now, what does that mean? The peripheral nervous system isn't getting the stuff that makes it turn those whatever the sensations are into electrical impulses that are going to travel from the sensor in your head into the brainstem and then up into other areas of your brain to make the system function the way it's designed. So because we're not using it, we lose it. And so those cells, the peripheral nervous system cells, downregulate. They decrease because they don't have to have as many mitochondria to make energy. Right, they're the powerhouse of the cell. The blood flow becomes less efficient because it doesn't need nearly as much. There's not enough blood for everything, so the brain has to decide we're going to shunt the blood to where we need it at any given time. And so the effects of decreasing the capillary beds, their efficiency, all of that, it all downregulates. And that's why this takes some time, because we have to bring it back up. And you'll feel good long before you're actually well, because we still have to get those cells to come up to speed so they're as close to like the other side as possible. And as we get them up to that same level, that's the goal. So peripheral nervous system downregulation. Number 3, central nervous system hypertrophy, or no, atrophy. We're going to put PIVC, okay? So the central nervous system, particularly in the area, remember I said that all the language is on this side so it doesn't leave enough real estate for the balance system, and it's the cortical balance system. So all of our balance, right or left, is at the bottom of the parietal lobe, at the bottom front, which is right down here, called the PIVC. The PIVC. And that, what happens there is atrophy. Central nervous system or cortical atrophy. And we tend to think that atrophy means it gets smaller, and it does. It does, and it's visible on MRI. It's even more valuable on fMRI, because in fMRI we can actually do measurements to tell when it gets bigger or when it gets smaller. But that atrophy is happening because we're not using it. If you don't use it, you lose it. So the solution to this problem overall becomes evident, right? We've got to stop the autoimmune. And we have protocol for that, and we've talked about it many times, and we'll continue to talk about it. Number 2, upregulate the peripheral nervous system. We're going to cause it to get active. We're going to give lots of in-office and home care stuff to force that peripheral nervous system to get stronger, to get improved in its ability to do its job within its capabilities, right? Because if you don't use it, you lose it. It becomes weaker, and as it becomes weaker, you can only push it as far as it can go. Muscles have a lot of blood flow, and they're able to grow fairly quickly, especially the voluntary stuff. But when you start getting into the central nervous system, if you push it too hard, you'll actually kill those cells. And that's what I believe, one of my most important skills is not only knowing what's wrong and knowing how to solve it, knowing the areas that I need to push, knowing how to push them, but more importantly, knowing when to stop. Remember, growth boils down to 3 things. You stress it, number 1, you nutrition it, and you recover it. So those cells have to be stressed, and we know how to stress them. They have to get the proper nutrition, and they have to get the proper recovery. And the most important part of that growth process is the recovery phase. Knowing how to not harm them and knowing how to make them grow through the stress and recovery process. And that's what we do here. So causing activity in the PIVC over and over again within its capabilities, causing it to increase its blood flow to cause it to hypertrophy. Hypertrophy, like when you go to the gym and pump up, right? Those muscles get bigger. Yeah, that's hypertrophy because of activity, which brings nutrition to that area. And so causing that to happen, you say, well, what if I lost cells? Yeah, you could have had some cells die. Can we still help? Yeah, with whatever's left. And it's vital to know that, because the longer you wait, the more you lose, and the more difficult the job is, and the less we have to work with. The cool thing is, the nervous system, the cells that you have operate according to not just how many cells, but more importantly, how many connections. And that's what we're involved in, is trying to get that increase in activity. And we've got the cerebellum to help out, because it's got massive amounts of cells. So hopefully that brings clarity in the solution of Meniere's disease. If you have any questions, let me know. We're happy to do another video. And remember, we're here when you're ready to take your life back.